What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the Music Hall of Williamsburg, and all the way from Ireland, we are here with God is an Astronaut. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. It's so awesome to have you here. Epitaph is your latest record, which came out in 2018. Do you want to give a rundown on how this record cycle has been so far and the making of this record and all that fun stuff?
Certainly. The record was written in memory of my 7-year-old cousin whose life was tragically taken away. And I think music was the only way that we could kind of come to terms with such an incomprehensible loss. And it just puts everything into perspective. We live in this big bubble that can just burst at just about at any time. And it just, everything shifted, changed me, I think, forever. Music it was always therapeutic, but now it was so necessary that I had to write this just to even come to terms with it. And we initially started off, I think, with the song Oisín, which I wrote the day of the news. And then as the events unfolded, the funeral and seeing Oisín in the coffin, and I wrote the song Epitaph, and it just kind of emerged. The whole album is essentially, each song captures a part of the story. And it was really, even when we play those songs live, you're not really in the venue, you're just back at those moments. And it's just a very traumatic time for us. When we had originally, when I had finished kind of the initial writing, I played it for Rob, and Rob came in and he kind of wanted to change some of the production techniques to kind of further suit the mood of the song. And I think Rob will kind of talk you through those.
Yeah, with that process, me and Connor kind of came in and we knew what the subject material was, and we were able to hear what was written, the melodies to support the music, but then we were kind of looking at the space it was sitting in, so the textures of the sounds, the soundscapes and everything else, and we just kind of, having a more objective point of view, wanted to make sure as much as possible that the timbre of the whole record really reflected what the story was trying to tell. So even if when you're listening, the story's not just there in the melodies, but it's also there it should take away the room, and you should kind of feel this kind of cold, kind of haunted kind of vibe from the record, and that's kind of what we came in and tried to deliver to the record.
Mm-hmm. Being that you had this tragedy happen, and I'm very sorry for your loss, this obviously, as you mentioned, determined the outcome of the music as well. So therefore, this wasn't like a follow-up to your previous record. This was a completely different approach to your songwriting in general, and has felt different than making any other album?
Yeah, I mean, it was completely different than anything that we'd ever done. It just, everything, we were writing a follow-up to Helios Erebus, which was kind of a more rock approach again, and it just went all out the window. We just completely changed. Lloyd came in and said, look, we need to change the way we were recording it as well, so we ended up getting ribbon mics, and Lloyd just ended up tuning the kit a completely different way, just to kind of get a more lo-fi kind of effect, because the last thing we wanted was a bombastic sounding record, and it's trying to be emotive in that way. So it was just complete. It was literally dominated by the events, the whole album. And now I find it very difficult to go and write another album, because I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to just write because I'm using my brain. I got to use my heart. So but there's always something to write about, So there's definitely some more stuff on the way as well.
I feel like the concept of loss, and many artists use pain as a paintbrush in many different ways. Are you with the intention of this record and this concept, are you trying to maybe engage the listener to sort of see things from your point of view and kind of make them feel how you were feeling in a way? Or is this record also maybe open to interpretation for other listeners to relate to who may have gone through a similar tragedy?
I think this is probably the first album that I can say that we don't want it to be interpreted differently. I think all the other stuff was a kind of more or less escapism, where we don't mind if people would drift away, and it would give people something positive. This one, we wanted to make sure that we captured the dread. Even in Epitaph, we wanted the guitar tones, I ended up pitching them in and out of tune. I wanted it to sound warped. The video is very distressing. We have the person at the Burns Archive kindly let us use it, and she's actually coming tonight. She was so moved by the story. So no, this is probably the first time we've written an album where we don't want people to reinterpret the events. It's definitely about pure tragedy and pure dread.
If you don't mind me asking, for your previous records, such as the self-titled record or the record before this one, were you looking at different sources of inspiration? Was it all coming from an internal source, or were you always looking at an external source as well?
I think I'd have to kind of go individually. Like certain songs it was kind of trying to escape reality, if that makes sense. It's kind of like you were trying to get away from the mundane reality and try to create a fantasy world. Like First Day of Sun is like an imaginary, magical planet where you'd be just transported away to somewhere. So it's a kind of like an escapism, battling kind of depression, but trying to put a kind of a positive light to everything. Certain songs like Fragile, and they're more about my battle of depression that I had years ago. And but I definitely, it was a kind of a more of a, it just felt more kind of to a point where you wanted to help the listener and kind of, you know, share your feelings and share interpretations, where, you know, this one obviously is just about one specific story. But, you know, at the same time, if someone can get something different out of this record, then that's good too.
Now, one thing that I know that you guys have a major emphasis on your live performance with your use of lights and visual aspects. Is like the visual aspects of your band like an extension of the music, or is the live show kind of like or in the visuals a completely separate entity from the music?
No, to us it's kind of is equally as important. The live show, I think, dare I say that, you know, it's not that we wanted to, but it nearly takes more time to perfect it the way we want to. We want to make sure that the shows are just, we want people to leave really happy. We want people to be, you know, we want to give people their money's worth, and we want to take people on a trip. We don't want it just to be a normal show. So we invested in hiring lights, and Derval, who does all our lights, she's very talented, and, you know, it really takes a lot of pride in the music and making sure that the lights match that. But it's a kind of a slightly more lively affair, obviously, live than it would be on record. But at the same time, we want to capture the darkness as well, and that's really important to us. So it's a kind of a further extension to what we do. I don't know, Rob, if you want to add anything.
I think sometimes people are surprised when they kind of come to a show and they kind of they hear the song on the record, you know, and then they hear, you know, the experience of live was much more, came across much more heavier kind of live than on the song on the record. It was kind of much more ambient. So I think people sometimes are quite surprised when they see the show, but they're also kind of, you know, it kind of comes together for them when they do actually see it, you know, with the lights. And, you know, sometimes they say like they prefer the live version of the song, like, you know, come to say, you know, but
yeah. Yeah. Well, what I find interesting is because like a band like Baroness, you know, all of their albums are based off of colors, and whenever they play a song off that album, they have those color lights on stage. So I don't know if maybe there's kind of like a synesthesia sort of element behind the lights, like if you adjust it depending on the songs you play, or if it doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, no, I've spoken with Derval on the kind of colors that we'd like per song. So, you know, we do go into that detail as well. And, you know, if it's Frozen Twilight, you know, it's kind of more of a wintry kind of song. So we kind of make sure that what you're getting is kind of matching the content as well. Live, I think it is a little bit more heavier. It's more dramatic. But I think on record, we want people to be kind of, it's slightly more meditative experience. And live, we're here to kind of, there's a lot of anticipation. People are turning up, but they're standing in a room, and then something needs to kind of happen. You know, a bit of different kind of magic. So we make sure that we take people on a roller coaster where it's ambient and beautiful, and then we can change it in a second to something completely different. So yeah.
Is there a similar energy that you guys have in the studio as you bring to your live presence, or when you're in the studio or a practice space, it's a completely separate mind frame altogether?
I would say it's a little bit different. I mean, I think when we're obviously writing a record, we're at home, and it's, you know, in the Glen of the Downs beside the Sugarloaf Mountain in Ireland, so it's a very peaceful place, and it's at night time in a very lonely place. You know, it's very dark and eerie. So it's kind of a more of a dreamlike effect, I feel, when I'm writing at that time of night as well, like the twilight hours of the morning. And here it's a little bit different, a lot in a live scenario where you can feel there's an adrenaline rush going on. You can feel the anticipation. So we do our very best to make sure that we don't lose the dreamlike experience, but I would say it's probably just a little bit more adrenaline driven live, just a little bit, but we do try to keep it in check if we can.
And I have two more questions for you guys. Coming from Ireland, I feel like it's a great musical capital. I mean, obviously, U2, one of the biggest bands in the world, coming from there. Is there like a scene for your style of music that you guys originated from in Ireland, or did you have to go outside your own territory in order to get God Is an Astronaut's name out there?
Well, we had to go outside Ireland to get some type of traction. Ireland had certainly back in the late 90s, you had the Jimmy Cake and you had the Redneck Manifesto, and they were kind of instrumental bands that had existed before we did. We came along with something slightly different, though. It was more electronic driven than those groups, and it finally got a bit of traction when we got a bit of radio play, and we started to pick up a bit of interest from the Irish fan base, and it definitely they've stayed very loyal to us. They still come to our shows today, and we're grateful to them. But it really started to take off more in Europe and in Russia and different places where it just Italy as well, just really large audiences over there, and. But I mean, today you've got some fantastic groups that have since come. So Watch You From Afar. You've got Girl Band, obviously different than what we do, but they're a really exciting group that I like. And Rob is doing some interesting stuff with Xenon Field. There's so much music on back in Ireland. It's incredible. Fontaine's DC just broke out. So yeah, amazing bands.
You mentioned like with your sound, your music is so experimental that like I feel like you could appeal to like an Animals as Leaders sort of fan base, or like a prog metal band, a stoner metal band, or any of that aspects, right? It has to be easier to sort of try new things when making new music, right?
Yeah, I think that's important. We don't want to be that group that kind of, I love AC/DC and stuff, groups like that, but we don't want to be that band that just kind of keeps doing the same thing and perfecting it. We definitely want to. Because the whole point of God Is an Astronaut when we started, apart from expressing ourselves, was to explore new territories, explore new places, and that was really important to us. And Rob pushes me pretty hard. He wants to make sure that sounds like something you did before. So and Lloyd is always challenging himself to change the patterns and the beats. So we also really want to make sure that we keep reinventing ourselves to a certain extent without losing what we are in the first place. Yeah.
And the final question for you is, and I want you all to answer this one because it's always the hardest question for every artist I interview, and that's why it's my favorite question to ask. Okay. How do you know when a song is done?
You can just feel it. There's a sense of, you just feel it in your heart. You say to yourself, that's it. You just know. It's a feeling. It's hard to explain, but it's definitely a feeling. If it's not right, you start asking yourself a question. You start asking people, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? If you're asking somebody, what do you think of it? It's not right and it's not ready. So that's kind of how I go with it.
Yeah, you can nearly notice when you've gotten to an end of a song because you kind of feel it's said what you wanted it to say. Because sometimes you can get to just a point of insanity where you're just pushing minutiae, but that's when you know it's done. You have to, I think with most art, things are never 100% maybe what you envision them to be. So it's always just a moment of it's finished and you let it go, but it's saying what you want it to say.
Mm-hmm. You're next.
I'll just say, when you've heard like a song for like 250th time, and you just say, no, that's it. That's enough. It's either it's good or it's fucking bad, and it's good. Let's go with and that's enough. No more tweaking. And that's
sometimes you can't Frankenstein it either. A song is just going to develop into what it needs to be. So there is that letting go point where I don't know. Maybe it's a song you do use. There are so many to hit the cutting room floor as well. But I think you always know at that point that your just productivity is gone. And you just need to move on.
Yeah, I think as Lloyd was saying, if you've listened to something 200 or 300 times and it's still there, it must be doing something right. And I think another good thing is if you're unsure, step away and come back to it. And that's the great thing about touring. Sometimes if you've written a couple of songs and then you come back and you've experienced different things, does the song still speak to you? And if it does, that's a really good sign, and normally it lasts. It's funny, like I've written so many songs over the years that would have been shelved and put away, and then I go, what the hell was I thinking? It's really good when I come back to it maybe a year later. So that's happened a few times.
Yeah. You never know if the song you leave out will be on like a B-side record or just be the biggest hit you guys ever had. So.
Yeah, that could happen, but yeah, not yet.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Oh yeah, no, thanks so much.
Thanks
Yeah.
very much for having
Is there just anything else you would like to promote in terms of tours or new music? This will be uploaded by midnight, so if it hasn't been announced yet, don't say it.
No, I mean, no, we're just finishing off the touring for Epitaph. We're going maybe back to Scandinavia next year. We missed it this year, so we're definitely looking to finish it off in Scandinavia and the Baltic region. That'll probably be the last dates that we do for the Epitaph tour.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Of course.
Cheers.
Everybody, we are here with God is an Astronaut. Pick up Epitaph if you haven't already. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We'll see you next time.